Today, we're taking an already modified Jeep Comanche and adding a custom 3-link front suspension. And we're upgrading the steering and shocks on this unique trail truck. It's all today here on Trucks.
Hey guys, welcome back to Trucks. We're getting ready to upgrade the front suspension on this Jeep MJ, otherwise known as a Comanche pickup truck. Now all the brackets are cleaned up, including the unibody frame rails. And you've actually seen us do this before on an XJ or a Cherokee. The only difference is the Comanche's got some extra bracing, but it's basically the same procedure. Now the Dana 30 front axle is stripped down of everything except for the spring cups, which we're going to reuse. But the new system is not just a kit in the box. The new 3-link is something different.
Now the parts we're going to be using to complete our custom 3-link are builder's parts from Rusty's Off-Road. We picked up forged flex ends and tube inserts for the lower links and heavy-duty rod ends with high misalignment spacers for the third upper link. For the track bar, we've picked up new rod ends and inserts and an over-the-knuckle style track bar bracket. We also picked up some rear shock mounts to relocate the rear shocks and take advantage of all the travel that's there. Now, we picked up a handful of brackets and tabs to complete this 3-link installation. And our original plan was to use a bracket like this to mount our lower arm to the unibody frame rail once we plated it. But after talking to Rusty, he had a different suggestion. He thought we ought to take a look at a new bracket they've designed that some Jeep speed racers are using. And it's pretty slick. This sandwiches the unibody frame rail, and this reinforcement plate comes in from the inside of the cab and sandwiches the sheet metal and the frame rail. Once it's bolted into place, well, you can just weld it as desired and finish things up, and you'll have one good and strong mount. These are the brackets we're using. Now, before we install the new lower control arm mounts, we want to do some frame rail plating to help distribute the load that the arms are going to put on the frame rail. Now, like we told you earlier, the new control arm mounts are designed to bolt on. So after marking and drilling some pilot holes, we can finish drilling them out to fit the provided hardware. Good. Now, the 3 bolts on the outside of the bracket are easy enough to get to, but the ones on the inside can be a little tricky. So you can either get creative with the wrench, or you can even weld the nut to the bracket on this middle bolt like we did. And that'll secure this top plate, make everything nice and strong. Then it was time for more frame plating, especially considering our 3rd link upper attachment point is going to be in the same area. Then after making a few plug welds, we massaged the plate to fit the contour of the floorboard. A few more plug welds and some perimeter welding, and we were done. Then we could work on the 3rd link bracket. Now, we wanted to keep this tab or bracket as close to the floorboard as possible to maximize the amount of vertical separation in between the lower control arm mount pivot point and the upper control arm pivot point. Then, using the actual rod end to space the tabs, we tacked everything in place. Note the tape around the threads of the rod end. You don't want weld spatter getting stuck in those threads and ruining your part. Well, I burn it in. All right, with all the brackets and tabs welded on the body or frame side of things, we can get to work adding parts to the axle. Now, before we tore this thing down, we took some before measurements. We've got the Jeep sitting at ride height, we've got the axle where it needs to be, we've got the front axle center line figured out, and we've got the caster and pinion angle matched up to where it was before. Now, we can start adding some parts. To maximize track bar length, we placed the track bar bracket as far over to the passenger side as possible, then added the 3rd link mount right next to it. The lower control arm mounts were flipped over and custom fit to our application. Now, to make our control arms, we're using 188 wall, 2-inch DOM and tube inserts from Rusty's. We've got a little hole drilled for a plug weld just for extra insurance. Now, since the tube insert and the tube itself is rather thick, we grabbed our Miller-Matic 252 to make sure we had plenty of amps to burn in this heavy metal. All right, and in about 4 hours, that'll be cool enough to work with. Now, the hardware used to attach the upper link is critical, since there is only one link to keep the axle from rotating. So we went to Industrial Depot and picked up some grade 8 5/8 bolts. The lowers use 9/16 hardware. Needless to say, we shouldn't have any fastener issues. Get the driver's side and we can mock this thing up or at least flex it.
Hey, welcome back to Trucks. Today, we're showing you how to upgrade your front suspension at the same time as you're saving money using Rusty's off-road builder parts. Now, there's a situation that comes up when you're using a Dana 30 front axle on one of these rigs. The situation is when you convert to a high steer or use an aftermarket diff cover, the tie rod literally comes into contact with the diff cover itself. Heck, we even ran into this problem when we did the Jeep Cherokee a while ago, if you remember. But the solution is really slick. Rusty's has got you covered. Check this out. The magic offset tie rod ends that literally space the tie rod out away from the diff cover, even in a lock-to-lock turn. Now, the link itself is heavy duty. Very unlikely you're going to bend that guy. But the best feature of this steering upgrade is that all the tapers and all the ends are designed to work with the stock tapers on both the knuckles and the pitman arm, making this a very sensible bolt-in.
Now you can see the track bar is barely hitting the diff cover at close to full bump. I guess we'd come in here and rebuild this track bar bracket, but I think if we come in here and just drill a hole a little bit higher, raise the track bar frame end up a little bit, we can fix this the easy way. All right, now we've got our link mounts and brackets fully burned into the axle, and we're about ready to move on to installing some shocks. Now the shocks we picked out are new from Rusty's, and they're the RX 200 series. It's a high-pressure monotube shock with progressive valving that ought to work really well with our Comanche. Now, the top is just going to bolt in, but well, we kind of sacrificed the lower mounts, so we're going to have to make a custom lower mount. And we've got about 10.5 inches of shock travel to work with. We want to split the difference, probably about 5 inches of up travel and 5.5 inches of down travel. Now we just need to make a mount. Now, what we came up with was pretty basic. We used a combination of 3/16 angle iron and some 1/8 inch plate to act as a gusset. We also used the shock mounting bar to space the bracket out. You may have also noticed we tack welded the nuts to the bracket, and that makes installation easy. Now, because of where this shock sits, we're trying to leave this lower control arm bolt accessible without having to remove the shock. But that only leaves us with about 4 inches of shock up travel, which is about what the truck rolled in here with, but short of our goal. Now, we only tack welded the brackets in place. Before we fully burn it in, we're going to set the truck down on the actual coil springs with the new tires, flex it out, and see if it's something we can work with or if it's something that needs to be changed. Now, first we had to remount the knuckle so we could install the tie rod end from the top. And it was a couple of inserts from Rusty's to finish things up. Now, if we didn't have these offset tie rod ends, as we made a lock-to-lock turn, this tie rod would come into contact with both the diff cover and probably the coil spring bucket. And if we still had sway bar end links, well, the mounts for those too. With these, we've got plenty of clearance. Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Well, we've had a chance to finish up the front suspension and paint the links and the axle. Out back, we've installed our new Rusty shocks using a couple of brackets that Rusty supplied. Now, we've got to mount it so nothing hangs below the axle tube for maximum ground clearance. And the back of the bracket, well, kind of protects the bottom of the shock. And the mounts, well, they look just a little bit better than the cobbled together mounts that were on here. All right, well, here it is all flexed out. The right front tire is stuffed up in the wheel well. The left front is just about below the rocker panel, and our custom 3-link is flat out working. And it just goes to show you, if you're willing to invest some elbow grease and go with builder parts instead of a kit, you can not only save some cash, you can also get some great results.